Good day, good people. I'm Dr. Johnny Pierce, but you can just call me Johnny. And this is actually well. Today, I'd like to talk about emotions, feelings. What are they? And how do they fit with wellness? I propose that feelings, by any kind of way of measuring them on their own from the very beginning of their existence, are a sign of wellness. I think our relationship with them often gets complicated because we either want them to be something other than what they are, employ them to do things that aren't their job, or simply don't like them. And because of our feelings about feelings, we find that they make our lives more complicated than they have to be. What I'm hoping to cover in this pod is how we can change that dynamic, because your feelings probably are trying to help you. In addition to that, maybe how we relate to our feelings improving can help us relate to others as we navigate their feelings as well. Over the course of the time that I talk with you today, I'm hoping to touch on some ways of looking at feelings and also ways of getting along better with them. First things first, what do I mean by feelings being signs of wellness? Um, we think about mental health and we think about wellness, again, using that as our starting point, not just our end game. And one of the things that is featured there is that a person has a healthy relationship with their feelings, that they are aware of their feelings. We use the term emotional intelligence and things of that nature. But that means that the person has whatever feelings they have and they interact with them in some type of way that we ultimately measure as being healthy. Well, what does that look like? Well, that means that if a person needs to cry, they don't find themselves feeling bad about the fact that they need to cry. They let themselves cry, they take what they can from the experience, and they move on. Someone who, by contrast, feels that crying is a sign of weakness, that person wouldn't seem to have the best relationship with their feelings. And as a result, they might resist the urge to cry because crying is weakness. Now, some of us have been taught that, and I feel for all of us who have had to overcome that. I had to at one point in time as well. But ultimately, the feeling that I need to cry about this isn't good or bad. It isn't right or wrong. It is. And that it is actually code for it's neutral. There is no added charge of positive or negative. We tend to add the charge. We tend to see things through the scope of, is this good or bad, positive or negative? And then we project onto the thing, in this case, something like crying, that it is this way. And in some cases, we see this as a statement of fact, that it's just a given. Why would you be crying? And then we have to explain the good reasons for crying. Well, if you lose somebody, or if they're tears of joy, but ultimately, we're adding all of this on to what started as a sense that crying is the thing I need to do right now. But what is that sense? Well, that sense in the form of feelings or emotions is a bit of data about your relationship with the world around you. There is something going on in your environment, whether it's your internal world or your external world, that is leading you to think, this is the next move for me. Now, should we trust our feelings out of hand without any kind of evaluation of them? I would say no. And I would say no simply because feelings and emotions are temporary. They come and they go. They're a natural part of life. We don't always know exactly where they came from, but we do know that if we wait long enough, they will actually pass. Sometimes that is within minutes. Sometimes that takes much, much longer. But in any event, understanding the dynamics of what an emotion or feeling is, how it works in the spectrum of wellness, and how to relate to it is what we're shooting for here. So to give a way to look at this, consider the following. There's a sky. We believe that the sky is almost always there. Maybe it wasn't there at one point in history, don't know, but it is there now. And in that sky, from time to time, we see clouds. Now, there are days where the sky doesn't seem to have a cloud anywhere in it. You look all the way around, there are no clouds at all. There are other days where there's so many clouds in the sky, it's hard to see the sky. I would say in this particular situation, we are the sky. We are always there. Our feelings would be the clouds, that some days are super cloudy, some days are partly cloudy, and some days there is the cloud around. And understanding our emotions or feelings through that lens and seeing it as normal for a cloud to pop up, or man, it's a real big storm today. If we just receive it with neutrality, then when it happens, it's not this shock to the system. We're not like, oh my God, something bad is happening. We don't add the charge of negativity. We don't add the charge of positivity in the case of, I feel really happy today. We take it all in stride. That doesn't mean that you don't enjoy when you're happy and that you don't dislike when you're not. It just means that how you receive it to begin with, that it doesn't catch you off guard, that it's not something that you feel like you have to change immediately, that it existing is not pathology. No, it's actually a part of you being well. Because if you didn't have emotions or feelings, you'd be less than yourself. Now, some people are more emotional than others, and there's nothing wrong with that. We all have different personalities. And remember, our value doesn't come from what we produce, it comes from the fact that we exist. So some of us exist to be the emotional outlet. We are the people who feel all the things and express all the feelings. And in some cases, we can give voice to what other people are feeling because they may not have the words for it. Enjoy that about yourself. And if you don't like it, then try to understand what it is about it that you don't like. Do you feel like you are too expressive? Do you feel you're too reactive? You would be the best one to assess that. Now, if you come to be okay with the fact that you might come across to others as more sensitive or more expressive, then feel comfortable in your own skin because it's okay. But in order for all of us to be well, we have to come to a place, regardless of how we feel about emotions, that they're going to be there, that they're a part of our lives. And if we allow them to, they can be very helpful. When I mentioned before about how they are used, and sometimes we may misemploy them, what did I mean by that? Well, if I have someone who is very skilled with electrician skills, they got all the skills of being an electrician, but I asked them to fix my pipes. They're going to work on my plumbing. Now, maybe this person's multifaceted and has skills in both departments, but if that person's exclusively someone who's skilled in electrical work and I ask them to work on pipes, they're probably not going to perform as well as they would if I had just let them work on my electrical needs. If emotions have one task, which is to make us aware of how we're relating to the world around us in the form of the message that is, I am sad, I am happy, I am excited, I am anxious, I am. If that's the job of the feeling, then when I tell the feeling that, oh, okay, thank you for showing up, now I know what to do, I've now made the feeling go from informant to informer. It's telling me not just how I feel, it's telling me what to do next. That's not its job. It's probably not going to work very well, because what about a feeling gives you any kind of roadmap of what's ahead? That's not what they do. And that, I don't believe, is what they're supposed to do. They're simply supposed to make you aware, and then you decide what to do with that awareness. I think a great illustration of this comes with the concept of a stop sign. So imagine you're driving along or you're walking along and you reach a stop sign. Now, if you've ever been around a stop sign, you'll notice some pretty clear markers of what a stop sign is. It's red, typically. It's an octagon, and in some cases, it actually has the word stop written on it. When you see one, it's pretty clear what its message is. Stop. So you stop. You put your foot on the brake, you stop your car, you stop moving your legs, and you stand there. What would happen if you just stood there or stayed with your foot on the brake? Well, if there's any cars behind you, they might start blowing their horn at you to go. If there's anybody waiting behind you to cross the walk or whatever the case may be, they like go around you or something, okay, not understanding why you're not moving. Because the stop sign doesn't tell you to stop for all time. It tells you to stop for an instant. After you've stopped, it becomes your responsibility to determine what to do next. So if you want to look at emotions through that lens, you get the message, whatever the message is about how you feel, and then you take it upon yourself to then evaluate, which is a thinking process, not an emotional process. Evaluate, what does this bit of information tell me about my next move? So after you've stopped, you may look around to consider the other bits of information available to you. Is it a two-way stop? Is it a four-way stop? Were you the first car to arrive at the stop sign? Or is the one across the street got the right of way? All of this information is something you process after you've done what the message gave you, which was to stop. Now, in my therapy sessions, when I'm working with clients, sometimes I take this a little further because I can get into the world of absurd and actually have a lot of fun with it. I have never in my life seen a stop sign drive a car. I pray I never see a day where a car is coming towards me with a stop sign behind the wheel. Stop signs lack a few things necessary to be successful drivers. They don't typically have arms or legs. They don't typically have eyes or brains. And as a result, if I saw a stop sign driving down the street as the driver of a car, I would immediately do everything in my power to get away from that car because I'd be terrified that I'm going to get hit by it. This is what it looks like when we allow our emotions and feelings to make decisions for us. That's not its job. It's not meant to do that. And I think we've all had the experience of doing something impulsively and then looking back and saying, I didn't even think before I did that. Matter of fact, what I'm doing now in reflection thinking is judging myself for having not thought beforehand and did whatever I did. So beware. Our emotions are typically neutral. We can add the charge of saying we like them or dislike them. We can add the charge of even saying that they're right or wrong. But how we feel is how we feel. And if we receive it neutrally, then we can actually unpack it and then decide what to do. If we only act on that one bit of data that gives us some awareness of our relationship with the world around us, it can end badly. Aside from a stop sign driving a car, which likely would end badly, what do I mean by us using our emotions as decision making tools and ultimately the sole decision making tools? And how does that look when it goes sideways? Well, it kind of looks like this. I'm upset. I become aware of my being upset. And the next thing that I do is I punch a wall. Well, in that moment, that instance, I went from being aware that I am not happy or I'm upset, I'm angry, choose your emotional term. And the next thing I do is I take action. And the action that I take is to displace that feeling against the wall. Well, if I do that, then I find myself potentially at risk of harming myself. Even if I have a really good jab, I could do damage to my hand. I'm probably going to do damage to the wall, which will then later need to be repaired. So I have felt and I have acted. And by feeling and then acting, I find myself reflecting and thinking about, why did I do this? And what was the plan? Because I didn't really seem to have a plan there. Okay, I hit the wall. Now what? So what I've been encouraging clients to do ever since I started using wellness as my primary method of intervention is to raise awareness around this pattern of behavior where someone feels and then they act and then they think about it. And in doing so, they actually lead to this cycle emerging where periodically I have feelings come up regardless of what they are. And because of those feelings, I don't do any kind of planning ahead, don't do any kind of unpacking, evaluating, trying to understand the feelings. None of that thought process gets activated. Instead, I go straight from how I feel to doing something. And typically, when we do that, we call that acting impulsively. When we act impulsively, then we get these outcomes that we aren't happy about more times than not. So, funny enough, now that I've acted, now I'm thinking about it. Now I'm reflecting. Now I'm judging myself, typically harshly, and that doesn't make me feel all that good. So now I'm right back where I started, where I have these feelings, and now I got to do something. What I've encouraged my clients to do for over a decade plus now is, hey, when you notice that you've got feelings, instead of acting on them as quickly as you can, it's worth your time to think about them. So you move the T. So you've gone from feeling, acting, then thinking to feeling, thinking, and then acting. And what's desired in that thought process is that when you think about your feelings, you try to come to understand them. So that term I mentioned earlier about emotional intelligence, it's been thrown around by a lot of people in my field, and it means different things to different people. When I think about emotional intelligence, I think about it through a few kind of layers. So first and foremost, are you emotionally aware? Because we can walk throughout our day, live our lives, and never pay attention to how we actually feel. In doing that, we would seem to be emotionally ignorant. So, because I don't know how I feel, then I really can't do much about it or interact with it very much. But if I'm aware of how I feel, now I'm in a position to make some decisions. For starters, I can name the emotion. When we give emotions names, it's not just something that you pick off the wheel of emotions or plucking out of the sea of emotions. It's also giving you some insight into where this emotion may have come from. Some of the bigger emotions that people usually talk about are anxiety, anger, and sadness. Anxiety is both emotion, but it can also be a clinical diagnosis. How is that possible? How does that work? Well, there's kind of the spectrum as far as what is expected for a person to experience in terms of anxiety over the course of a lifetime in a particular situation and so on. So if we're on the, non-pathological piece of the spectrum when it comes to anxiety, a person may get a tug in their stomach. They might feel tightness. A person might feel their palms are starting to sweat a little bit, or their forehead gets a little sweaty, their heart might race a little bit, their breath might become shallow. But in certain situations that one might anticipate that being something they experience. If you've got a paper due, if you're a student and it's due the next day and you've done nothing for this paper, even though you got this assignment weeks ago, well, the night before the paper is due, you might find yourself really focused on the paper to the point where you can't seem to do anything else because all you're thinking about is that paper. In that particular case, you're experiencing what most would consider to be a healthy range of anxiety because it's prompting you to take action towards the assignment. It doesn't tell you how to do the assignment, but it's prompting you, much like the stop sign, to attend to the assignment. Now, you've probably heard of fight, flight, or freeze. These are reactions that we have when our systems get activated. Well, in the case of freeze, the person may open up their laptop or break out pen and pad and they go to put some words on the page or type some on the screen and they can't think of anything. Their mind has gone blank. That too is somewhat in that healthy range of anxiety because it's not unusual for a person to have a hard time coming up with the right thing to say or do when they're already activated like that. In some cases, the person works feverishly. They just get stuff done, they start cranking it out, and this person comes to rely on the last second to be the catalyst for them to do amazing things. They become procrastinators, and they, in some cases, want to change this because it doesn't feel great in the moment when they're sitting there looking at the clock and moving as fast as they can and all that good stuff. But they love the results. They can produce under pressure, as we say. They're clutch. And then there's the people who they just say, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. It doesn't matter. I don't want to do it. And since I don't want to do it, then, you're going to have to give me an extension on this assignment or whatever the case may be. So the freeze, my brain goes blank. The flight, I'm just going, I'm going. And the fight is, nope, you can't make me do it. That can be healthy. We can add a charge to it and say it's bad, that it's lazy, it's this person's not being responsible, whatever. We can add all these judgments, but if we receive it neutrally, we see, oh, this person, this is how they express or experience anxiety in these situations. If we just see it as that, then we can actually come up with some ideas for intervention. So if we don't add any charge and we just receive it neutrally, then we're good to go. For that person who might freeze and they might find that they are so overwhelmed by the task that they can't get anything done, then we help that person make the task smaller. Hey, you had a 5-page paper. You're probably not going to write all 5 pages at the first keystroke. How about we focus on the first paragraph? So we make the task smaller. For the person who is activated and it just gets them going and they just get to typing like crazy, but they don't want to necessarily find themselves in that situation over and over again. Well, that person might intervene by creating artificial deadlines. So instead of it being that the night before the paper is due, they're working like a mad person in order to get stuff done. No, how about, hey, you got this 2 weeks ago. What about, doing this much of it this weekend and this much of it the next weekend? And that way you've made it smaller in that way. And you can still be motivated to get this work done because you gave yourself a deadline. And then for the person who's just going to fight, helping them understand that while they may not have interest in doing whatever it is they don't want to do, if it's something that's a necessity, then finding a way to incentivize them to get that done. Maybe putting something that they're really interested in as a reward for getting the thing that they don't want to do done. A lot of parents, we employ these strategies. But I bring up anxiety because anxiety is not inherently good or bad. Even when we experience pathological anxiety, and what does that look like? Oh, it looks far different from that student having a rough time getting that paper done. This is the person who can't leave their home. This is the person who spends many hours laying in bed attempting to go to sleep at night, but they're staring at the ceiling and playing out every possibility about what tomorrow and the month ahead can bring. This is the person who, when they're in a group, they feel like they're under attack, even though the people around them aren't doing anything to them. This is the person who has to check and make sure they lock the door 8 times. Anxiety has a bunch of different clinical diagnoses that have been, sprouted out of it, but ultimately, the heart of it is still anxiety. It's still somewhat of a battle over control and the lack thereof that we typically have. So, anxiety itself, even when it's pathological, isn't bad. It isn't trying to hurt you. It's that maybe the systems behind your sensitivity to lack of control have been hyperactive in some way, and we want to get them back to a different baseline. We'll talk about that in a different pod, though. I only bring that up because I know that anxiety is something that people can sometimes be challenged by, and it's one of those emotions that most people would term negative. It's not necessarily negative. Anxiety can actually be a big help to you. Imagine walking towards the street, and instead of looking both ways, you just walk out into the street. Doesn't matter if any cars are coming or not. You just go. Well, you might get hit by a car. That feeling that you have in your stomach the second you step off the sidewalk, that little pain, that knee jerk, oh, that's actually anxiety. And that anxiety is trying to help you, trying to give you awareness of the world around you so that you can make a sound decision about what to do next, just like the stop sign. Now, I mentioned anger as well. Anger is another one of those emotions that's got a negative connotation to it. We shouldn't be angry. Many people even say anger is a secondary emotion, that you're not really angry. There's some other emotion in play that you're not able to recognize, so it just comes out as that. I happen to be a guy, and guys in particular have been told, you need anger management skills. And I've had a few clients call in asking about, do we provide anger management services? And I say, oh, okay, well, hey, nice to know you got every one of the other emotions figured out. This should be a piece of cake, no problem. And of course, they end up chuckling because if you struggle to navigate and manage your anger, you probably struggle to manage and navigate other emotions as well. It's just that of the ones that I just identified, anxiety, anger, and sadness, anger is the one that tends to concern other people. Because if you're anxious, that really affects you, and everybody's like, I really hate that for you, but like, doesn't affect me in a profound way in many cases. If you're sad, that really sucks. I hate that you feel that way. But again, it doesn't really affect me in a profound way. But if you're angry, well, you might hurt me. You might be dangerous. You might be somebody who puts my life at risk. I don't know if I want to be around you. So anger tends to be the one that gets highlighted as the one that people really need to work on. Because if you don't work on your anger, then you're going to hurt somebody or yourself potentially. And we don't want you to do that. Well, the thing is, anger has its place. And again, it's neutral. So people become angry for a lot of different reasons. And if I can't name that I'm angry, I reframe it as something else because it's easier for the people around me to deal with. I may never address what it's really trying to raise my awareness about. Sadness. I don't think anybody has ever been around somebody they cared about that was sad and made light of it. It's probably one of the most heartbreaking things because you see this person that you care about in seemingly so much distress, and you just want to take it away from them. And oftentimes when you ask them why are you sad, they can't really answer the question in a precise way because they don't know. And one of the things that I'm hoping can be accomplished through this pod, especially around wellness, is that when we find ourselves feeling an emotion, anxiety, anger, sadness, and anyone beyond that, that we see this as This is a sign that I need to look inward first, what's going on in my internal world, and then look outward and attempt to understand how am I relating with the world around me. Because sadness is not in its own right a clinical experience. Anger can become clinical, anxiety can become clinical. Sadness isn't depression. And I think that's a really big distinction that we really need to make. Depression is always clinical. There is no non clinical version of depression. Sadness is not always clinical. Like it's typically not clinical at all. It's an emotion that we feel that we may not like, but it doesn't tend to escalate to what depression is. Depression is a collection of a number of symptoms over a certain amount of time, and it tends to have pretty significant consequences. So distinguishing depression from sadness is important, but seeing somebody you love or care about be sad is heartbreaking. Now, I mentioned those three emotions not as if they're the only three, but they tend to be the big three, especially from a diagnostic standpoint. Going back into what I was saying about emotional intelligence, though, there's this emotional awareness. So I know that I have some emotion. I can name the emotion. And by naming the emotion, I get some idea about what this emotion's trying to tell me. And maybe even I look at it that way that, whether I like this emotion or not, it's trying to give me information. What is it trying to tell me? Well, the next kind of layer to that emotional intelligence would be emotional expression. Because if I don't know how to express how I feel, then those around me don't know what's going on with me. So while I might be aware, they're not aware. And therefore, our relationship may get compromised or get complicated because they don't know how to interact with me. And once I become skilled at expressing emotion, which is something I'll tackle in another pod, then I'm going to be in the best position to have those around me at least know what's going on with me. Now, I may want those around me to have better skills with their own awareness of their emotions, their own expression of their emotions, but that's something that I've probably come to accept I don't have any control over because that would be part of being emotionally intelligent. I can't control how you are aware of your own emotions and how you express your own emotions, but I'm aware of mine. I'm willing to express them in a way that hopefully you can receive it. And I'm willing to even learn multiple ways of expressing them so that you can receive it better. And then I become maybe more skilled at picking up on your emotions. So I notice that, oh, you tend to bite your fingers when you're nervous, or you tend to look down when you're not feeling too proud about yourself or whatever it was you've done, or you tend to be a little bit more avoidant when you think you're going to upset me with some news that you have. So I'm starting to make connections between my own awareness of my emotions, my own expression of my emotions, and then how that plays out with you. But when I communicate with you about yours, I'm a little cautious. I don't pretend to know all things. I may ask questions. Hey, how are you doing? I noticed that you did this. I'm wondering what that might mean. Those kind of questions demonstrate that I've been paying attention to you, but I don't know and I don't want to guess at what the meaning is behind my observations because I know my observations may be biased by my own internal world and what's going on with me. So that give and take is part of the layers and the kind of demonstration of emotional intelligence. I'm really looking forward to having someone join me to discuss emotional intelligence on a bigger scale because it is one of the most important topics that my field is trying to address these days. When it comes to wellness as the starting point rather than just the end game, I think all of us could benefit from raising our emotional intelligence, becoming more aware of our own emotions, how we tend to receive them, becoming better skilled at how we express our emotions, and also understanding that not everybody's in the same spot. If I'm expecting you to be where I am, despite no reason to believe that because you haven't suggested that you're doing any of that, me getting frustrated with you around skills that you're still building, that doesn't benefit either one of us. Now, I want to land this plane because it's been flying for a little while and this wasn't meant to be too long of a flight. But in the grand scheme of things, emotions and feelings are not our enemies. And I really want that to be the overwhelming message coming out of this pod. When I talk about actually being well, I mean it from the standpoint of, with emotions and feelings, you feel them. You feel them deeply and richly. You receive them. They're not something that you fight off or that you avoid, and that you ultimately learn how to express them in ways that can be received by others so that they can better understand you. In your internal world, when you start to notice that you're starting to emote or you have feelings coming to the surface, be curious. Please feel and then think. Because by feeling and then thinking, you give yourself access to a dynamic that you just don't get the other way around when you feel and then you act. Feelings do not offer us great guidance about what to do next. They give us instantaneous messages. Stop. Um, Slow down, look both ways. Like, it gives us that, but it doesn't tell us how to proceed from there. Hey, work on that assignment. It doesn't tell you how to do the assignment. It just gives you an instantaneous message that it's your responsibility to then unpack and think about. So if I approach my feelings with curiosity, I can wonder where they come from. I can wonder what they're trying to tell me. I don't have to judge them. Judging is a thought process just as much as being curious is a thought process. But I don't have to judge them. That's a choice that I make. That's a charge that I add. So if I decide to receive them neutrally and I think about them from a curious standpoint, why do I feel this way? And being okay with the fact that I may not get a definitive answer. Like, I might not come to know exactly why I feel exactly how I feel, but I'm open to looking. And then, still using thought as this medium, I plan my actions. So the thought process that leads to the planning of the actions could actually start long before I have any feelings come up. I can have goals. I can have things that I've been trying to achieve. I can be really, really concerned about how things play out. I can try to take others into account. I can do all this independently of how I feel. It doesn't mean I snuff out my feelings and I ignore them or anything like that. No, I welcome them because they're informing me. And I bring them together with my plans and my goals. And I try to see how they are working together. And I may even look at, oh, this is caution. This feeling that's arising for me is giving me caution about how I'm going to proceed, because I thought I was going to proceed this way. But now that I have this feeling coming up, maybe I need to look at that a second and third time. But if I'm acting based on my thoughts, I'm more likely to feel good about following through on a plan, moving closer to a goal that I'm trying to achieve, and so on. So it's not that we're saying the feelings are bad or that we shouldn't have feelings. It's letting them be employed properly. Now, we can't make our decisions about what to do next independently of feelings. We need to take them into account, but we also need to take into account, well, what was the plan? What did I hope to accomplish? And if these things can't align, that's where I'm doing the work in the curious space to get them to line up. And then I act on what I've ultimately come to. So I felt, I thought, and then I acted. And typically, if I follow this pretty consistently, what I'll end up coming to is that I feel better, or I have feelings that I like more. And sometimes that may take longer because I might have a long process ahead. But I want to wrap this up now. I thank you for spending some time listening to what I had to say about emotions and feelings. Naturally, thoughts kind of slipped in there, and so did actions, because it's really hard to separate them completely, considering how connected they are. I didn't get a chance to tackle too much of how we relate to our emotions and navigate them in relationships. I definitely plan on addressing that at another pod. But for now, we're wrapping this up, and click like if you liked it. Share your thoughts in the comments section. If you haven't subscribed already, go ahead and click that as well. And hey, there's this little bell there that notifies you when the next pod is finally put up. So hey, click that as well. Thank you for your time. Be well.